I never thought I would be standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning, watching a tow truck driver hook up my propane delivery truck while some self-righteous woman in a tennis outfit screamed about community standards. But there I was, coffee mug in hand, trying to process what was happening. My name is Nathan Kramer, and I own a small propane delivery business in Mesa, Arizona. I have been running this operation for almost 15 years, servicing homes, businesses, and medical facilities throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. The truck in question was not some beaten-up eyesore. It was a well-maintained 2018 Ford F550 with a professional propane tank mounted on the back, complete with all the proper DOT certifications and safety equipment. I parked it in my own driveway at my own house that I purchased 3 years ago. The woman doing the screaming was Patricia Henderson, the president of the Saguaro Springs Homeowners Association. She was in her mid-50s with that specific haircut that seemed to be standard issue for HOA board members. You know the one. Blonde highlights, severely angled, shorter in the back. She wore designer sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment, and had her arms crossed in that universal pose of someone who believes they are absolutely, unquestionably right. Mr. Kramer, I have told you repeatedly that commercial vehicles are not permitted in residential driveways, according to Section 7.3 of the CC and Articles, Patricia said, her voice rising to ensure that my neighbors could hear every word. You have ignored 3 written notices, 2 emails, and a certified letter. The board voted unanimously to have the vehicle towed at the owner's expense. I took a slow sip of my coffee, counting to 10 in my head. Patricia, this is not a commercial vehicle by the legal definition. It is registered as a light commercial truck, which is under the weight limit specified in the CC and Articles. I looked it up. Your own rules say vehicles under 10,000 pounds are permitted. That is a matter of interpretation, she snapped back. The spirit of the rule clearly prohibits business vehicles. The spirit, I said, feeling my own anger rising. Since when do we enforce the spirit of rules? What about Jim Martinez 3 houses down who parks his landscaping trailer every night? Or Susan Chen who has that van with her catering company logo plastered all over it? Patricia's jaw tightened. Those situations are different. How exactly are they different? They just are. This discussion is over. The truck is being towed. I turned to the tow truck driver, a younger guy who looked supremely uncomfortable with the whole situation. Hey man, you know this is private property, right? She does not have the legal authority to do this. He shrugged apologetically. I've got a work order from the HOA management company. They have the authority listed in their contract with residents. If you want to dispute it, you will have to take it up with them. I am just doing my job. I pulled out my phone and started recording. For the record, I am documenting this. Patricia Henderson is having my legally parked vehicle towed from my private property at 7 in the morning without proper cause. Record whatever you want, Patricia said, actually stepping closer to my phone. You signed the CC and Articles when you purchased your home. You agreed to abide by all rules and regulations. Actions have consequences, Mr. Kramer. The tow truck finished hooking up my delivery vehicle. I watched, helpless, as it was lifted and secured. The driver handed me a slip of paper with the impound lot information. That will be $350 to retrieve it, plus $85 per day storage, he said quietly. Sorry, man. As the tow truck pulled away with my business vehicle, my phone started ringing. It was my dispatcher, Tommy. Nate, we have got a problem, he said when I answered. The Greenfield Medical Center just called. They need an emergency propane delivery. Their backup generator tank is running on fumes and they have got some kind of power grid issue. They are calling everyone they can find. My stomach dropped. Greenfield Medical Center was a specialty hospital that handled long-term care patients, many of them on ventilators and other life support equipment. Their backup generator was literally a matter of life and death. "How fast do they need it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Like now. They have been running on generator power since last night, some kind of transformer issue with the main grid. APS says it could be hours before power is restored." I looked at Patricia, who was still standing in my driveway looking smug. "Tommy, the HOA just had my truck towed." "You are kidding me." I wish I was. "Look, call Garcia Propane, see if they can cover it. Tell them we will owe them one." "Already tried. Their trucks are all out on routes. Everyone is slammed because of the heat wave. Demand is through the roof." I closed my eyes. The temperature had been hovering around 115 degrees for the past week. Everyone was running their air conditioning at maximum capacity, which meant power demands were astronomical. It also meant that propane suppliers were working overtime. What about Miller and Sons, out of service area? They do not go that far east. Damn it. I opened my eyes and looked at Patricia. "Tommy, let me call you back." I walked over to where Patricia was now checking something on her phone, looking entirely too pleased with herself. "Patricia, I need my truck back right now. There is a medical emergency." She did not even look up. "That sounds like a you problem. Should have followed the rules." There are patients at Greenfield Medical Center who could die if they do not get propane for their backup generator. I am the only supplier available right now. That got her attention. She lowered her phone and looked at me over her sunglasses. "That sounds very dramatic." "It is not dramatic. It is the truth. I need to get to the impound lot and get my truck right now. The board has made its decision. Perhaps this will teach you to respect community standards." She turned and started walking toward her own house. I stood there for a moment, absolutely furious, but I did not have time to argue. I ran inside, grabbed my wallet and keys, and jumped into my personal truck. The impound lot was in an industrial area north of the 202, about 20 minutes away in good traffic. Of course, there was no such thing as good traffic in Phoenix during morning rush hour. I sat in gridlock on Country Club Drive, watching the minutes tick by, calling the impound lot repeatedly. When someone finally answered, I explained the situation. "Sir, we cannot release the vehicle until all fees are paid in full," the woman on the phone said in a bored tone. "How much?" $350 for the tow, plus the first day storage is prorated at $42. Total is $392. "I will be there in 15 minutes with a credit card." I called Tommy back and told him to inform Greenfield that I was getting the truck and would be there within 2 hours. He said they were getting increasingly desperate. The impound lot was exactly as depressing as you would imagine. Chain-link fences, cracked asphalt, and rows of vehicles in various states of disrepair. My pristine propane truck looked completely out of place among the beat-up cars and abandoned vehicles. The office was a small trailer with a single clerk who moved with the urgency of a sloth. I practically threw my credit card at her, signed all the papers, and finally got the release form. The whole process took 45 minutes that felt like 4 hours. By the time I got the truck out of the lot and on the road toward Greenfield Medical Center, it was almost 9 in the morning. Tommy called again. "Nate, the hospital administrator has been calling every 5 minutes. They are getting really worried. Tell them I am on my way. Ida is 45 minutes. I made it in 35, possibly breaking several speed limits in the process." When I pulled into the medical center's service entrance, There were 3 people waiting for me, including a woman in scrubs who I assumed was a nurse and a man in a suit who had administrator written all over him. "Thank God," the administrator said as I climbed out. "I am Robert Chen, facility director. We are running critically low. Generator is at about 20% capacity." "Let me get this set up," I said, already moving to unhook the fill hose. "This will take about 30 minutes to fill your tank completely." I had done this particular hospital dozens of times, so I knew exactly what I was doing. The process was smooth and efficient. While the propane flowed, Robert Chen stood nearby, visibly relaxing as the gauge climbed. "I have to ask," he said, "what happened this morning?" "Your dispatcher said something about a tow." I gave him the abbreviated version of the HOA incident. His expression went from confused to angry. "Let me get this straight. Your HOA had your emergency services vehicle towed because they did not like how it looked. That is about the size of it. Do they realize that we have 68 patients in this facility, including 23 on ventilators?" I tried to explain that. She did not care. Robert pulled out his phone. "What is this woman's name?" "Patricia Henderson. She is the HOA president." He typed something rapidly, his face flushed. "This is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable." The tank filled without issues. I did my standard safety check, verified all the connections, and had Robert sign off on the delivery. He shook my hand firmly. "Send me the invoice directly. I am paying this one personally, and I am adding a significant tip. You got here when we needed you." As I was packing up my equipment, a news van pulled into the parking lot. Channel 12, one of the local Phoenix stations. Robert noticed my expression. "I called them," he said flatly. "The public should know when an HOA's petty rules nearly cause a medical crisis." I was not sure how I felt about that, but I did not have time to think about it. A reporter and cameraman climbed out and made a beeline for us. The reporter, a woman in her 30s with perfect hair, introduced herself as Monica Rivera. "Mr. Chen, I understand there was some kind of emergency here this morning." Robert launched into the story with the enthusiasm of someone who was genuinely angry. He explained about the power outage, the backup generator, the desperate search for propane, and then the kicker about the HOA having my truck towed. Monica's eyes lit up the way reporters' eyes do when they smell a good story. She turned to me. "Mr. Kramer, is it? Can you tell me what happened from your perspective?" I was not great on camera, but I walked her through the morning's events. I kept it factual, did not embellish, just explained exactly what Patricia had done and what I had told her about the medical emergency. "And how did she respond when you explained that patients could be in danger?" Monica asked, holding the microphone toward me. "She said it sounded like a me problem and that I should have followed the rules." Monica's eyebrows shot up. Even through her professional demeanor, I could see the disbelief. "She said that. Those exact words. Pretty close. She also said maybe it would teach me to respect community standards." The segment aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. Tommy called me, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Dude, you are all over the news. They are roasting the HOA. This is amazing." I turned on the television and found Channel 12. Sure enough, there was Monica Rivera standing in front of Greenfield Medical Center, explaining the situation in that serious news voice. They showed clips of Robert Chen looking appropriately grave, me looking uncomfortable in my work clothes, and then they dropped the hammer. They had somehow tracked down Patricia Henderson and showed up at her house with cameras. The footage of Patricia trying to explain her position while clearly not understanding how bad it looked was almost painful to watch. "Community standards must be maintained," she said, standing in her doorway. "Mr. Kramer was warned multiple times. Rules are rules. But what about the patients at the medical center? Monica asked. Were you aware that your actions could have put lives at risk? That is a gross exaggeration. I am sure the hospital had other options. According to facility director Robert Chen, they did not. Mr. Kramer's company was the only available propane supplier in the entire metro area at that time. Patricia's face went through several interesting color changes. Well, that is not, Mr. Kramer should have. If he had just followed the rules in the first place, none of this would have happened. The news segment ended with Monica doing a piece to camera about HOA overreach and the balance between community standards and common sense. They even brought in a legal expert who explained that while HOAs do have broad authority, they can potentially be held liable if their actions directly cause harm. My phone started ringing off the hook. Other news stations wanted interviews. My existing customers called to express support. I even got a few calls from people wanting to switch their propane service to my company specifically because of what happened. But the most interesting call came at around 8 that night. It was from a number I did not recognize with a Mesa area code. Mr. Kramer, this is Donald Pearson. I am on the board of directors for Saguaro Springs HOA. I am calling to apologize for what happened this morning. I sat up straighter on my couch. You are on the board with Patricia Henderson. Unfortunately, yes. Though after today, I am seriously reconsidering my involvement. Patricia acted unilaterally this morning. The board vote she referenced was for sending you another warning letter, not for towing your vehicle. She took it upon herself to escalate the situation without consulting the rest of us. So she lied. Essentially, yes. Several board members, myself included, have been trying to reach you all day to apologize. We have already contacted the towing company and gotten a full refund of your fees. We will be cutting you a check for the $400, plus additional compensation for your time and trouble. I did not know what to say. I appreciate that, but honestly, the bigger issue is that I need to be able to park my work truck at my house. This is how I make my living. Absolutely agreed. We are holding an emergency board meeting tomorrow night. I can almost guarantee that we will be amending the vehicle restrictions in the CC and Articas. Several of us have been pushing for this anyway. Your truck is clearly well maintained and professional. It is ridiculous that it was ever an issue. What about Patricia? There was a long pause. That is being discussed. Her behavior today was not acceptable. The news coverage has been very damaging to the community's reputation. We are exploring our options. After I hung up, I felt slightly better but still angry about the whole situation. The principle of it bothered me. How many other people had Patricia harassed with her arbitrary interpretations of the rules? The next day, I got back to my regular delivery schedule. Everywhere I went, people had seen the news. I got handshakes, thanks, and quite a few new business cards. My phone rang constantly with new customer inquiries. Around 2 in the afternoon, Tommy transferred a call to my cell. It was Patricia Henderson. Mr. Kramer, she said, her voice tight and controlled. I am calling to request that you attend the HOA board meeting tonight. There are some matters that need to be discussed. Donald Pearson already invited me, I said. I will be there. Good. That is, yes. 7 o'clock at the community center. She paused and I could hear something in her voice. Stress. Fear, maybe. The news coverage has been very unfortunate. Unfortunate, I repeated. That is one way to describe it. I hope we can resolve this situation amicably. She hung up before I could respond. The community center was packed that night. Apparently, word had spread about the meeting, and half the neighborhood showed up. I recognized a lot of faces. including Jim Martinez with his landscaping trailer and Susan Chen with her catering van. They both gave me supportive nods as I walked in. The board sat at a long table at the front of the room. Patricia was in the center, looking significantly less confident than she had in my driveway. Donald Pearson sat to her right, a tall man in his 60s with gray hair and glasses. There were 3 other board members whose names I did not know yet. Donald called the meeting to order and immediately addressed the elephant in the room. I think everyone knows why we are here tonight. This past Tuesday morning, an incident occurred involving Board President Patricia Henderson and resident Nathan Kramer. Patricia, would you like to explain what happened? Patricia cleared her throat. She looked out at the crowd, which was watching her with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. On Tuesday morning, I arranged for the towing of Mr. Kramer's commercial vehicle, which was parked in his driveway in violation of the CC and Articus. And what happened after the vehicle was towed? Donald prompted. There was an emergency at a local medical facility that required Mr. Kramer's services. Can you be more specific? Patricia's face reddened. Greenfield Medical Center needed an emergency propane delivery for their backup generator. There were patients on life support. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone in the back yelled, "You could have killed people." Donald raised his hand for quiet. Patricia, when Mr. Kramer informed you of the medical emergency, what was your response? I told him that the board's decision stood. What was your exact response? We have seen the news coverage. We have heard Mr. Kramer's account. What did you actually say? Patricia looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. I said it sounded like his problem and that he should have followed the rules. The crowd erupted. Multiple people started yelling at once. Donald had to use a gavel to restore order. Furthermore, Donald continued once the room quieted down, Patricia told Mr. Kramer that the board had voted unanimously to have his vehicle towed. Patricia, can you clarify that statement? The board voted to send another warning letter. I felt that stronger action was needed. So you lied to Mr. Kramer about the board's authorization. Patricia did not answer. Donald turned to me. Mr. Kramer, the board would like to formally apologize for what happened. Patricia acted without authorization and created a dangerous situation. We have already refunded your towing and impound fees. Additionally, we would like to offer you $5,000 as compensation for the stress, lost work time, and damages to your business. That caught me off guard. $5,000. We feel it is appropriate given the circumstances. Furthermore, we are immediately suspending the commercial vehicle restrictions in the CC and Articus, pending a full review and rewrite. Your truck, and any other similar well-maintained work vehicles, are welcome in driveways. The crowd applauded. Patricia sat rigid in her chair, staring straight ahead, but Donald was not done. Finally, there is the matter of Patricia's position on the board. I am calling for a vote of no confidence in her leadership as president. The room went silent. Patricia's head snapped toward Donald, her eyes wide. You cannot do this. Actually, I can. It is in our bylaws. Any board member can call for a vote of no confidence if they believe the president has acted inappropriately. I believe you have. Specifically, you exceeded your authority, misrepresented the board's decisions, and created a situation that could have resulted in serious harm or death. All in favor of removing Patricia Henderson as HOA president. 4 hands went up immediately. Only Patricia's hand stayed down. The motion passes. Patricia, you are removed as president, effective immediately. Do you wish to remain on the board as a general member? Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I do not have to sit here and be humiliated like this. I have given 5 years to this community. 5 years of my time, my energy, making sure that property values stay high and standards are maintained. This is the thanks I get. Patricia, Donald said quietly, you nearly caused people to die because you were mad about a truck in a driveway. I think some humiliation is warranted. Patricia grabbed her purse and walked out of the meeting. The door slammed behind her. The meeting continued for another hour. They voted Donald in as the new president. The board opened the floor for residents to voice concerns about other HOA rules that might need revision. It turned into a surprisingly productive discussion about reasonable standards versus petty enforcement. Afterward, several people came up to shake my hand and thank me. Apparently, Patricia had been a problem for a while, targeting different residents for various minor infractions. I was just the one who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but with enough of a public spotlight that she could not brush it under the rug. Jim Martinez bought me a beer at the local bar afterward. You did the whole neighborhood a favor, he said. That woman sent me 4 violation notices last year because one of my trailer tires was over the sidewalk by 3 inches. 3 inches. Why did not you guys vote her out before? She always had enough support on the board. Plus, most people do not pay attention to HOA stuff until it affects them directly. But you got the news involved, man. That changed everything. I went home that night feeling vindicated but exhausted. The whole situation had been ridiculous from start to finish. All over a truck in a driveway. But it was not over yet. 2 days later, I got a call from a lawyer named Michelle Edwards. She explained that she represented Greenfield Medical Center, and they were considering legal action against the Saguaro Springs HOA for reckless endangerment. While no patients were ultimately harmed, she explained, the facility came dangerously close to losing power to critical life support systems. The hospital's board of directors believes that the HOA's actions constitute gross negligence at minimum. What does that mean for me? You would likely be called as a witness. We would need your testimony about the timeline of events, what you told Patricia Henderson, and her response. The hospital is also considering filing a complaint with the state against Ms. Henderson personally. I agreed to cooperate. The lawsuit moved forward slowly, as these things do. Meanwhile, life got back to normal. My business actually boomed thanks to all the publicity. The new HOA board was reasonable and professional. Donald Pearson even recommended my company to several other residents who needed propane services. Patricia Henderson put her house up for sale 3 weeks after the board meeting. According to neighborhood gossip, she and her husband were moving to Scottsdale. I saw her once more, loading boxes into a moving truck. She saw me watching from my driveway, where my propane truck was legally and peacefully parked, and quickly looked away. The lawsuit settled out of court 6 months later. The HOA's insurance paid Greenfield Medical Center an undisclosed sum. Part of the settlement included mandatory training for all HOA board members about emergency services and the limits of their enforcement authority. I also found out through Donald that Patricia had been personally fined by the state for interfering with emergency medical services. It was not a huge fine, maybe $1,500, but it went on her record. If she ever tried to join another HOA board, that would follow her. A year after the incident, I was doing a routine delivery to a retirement community in Gilbert when I ran into Robert Chen, the administrator from Greenfield Medical Center. He had moved to a new position but remembered me immediately. "Nathan, good to see you. How is business?" "Really good, actually. That whole situation ended up being great publicity." "Silver lining," he agreed. You know, we ended up installing a larger propane tank after that scare. Never want to cut it that close again. Smart move. Hey, I never properly thanked you. You could have told us you could not make it, that the HOA had screwed you over and we were on our own. But you fought to get that truck back and got to us in time. That mattered. We talked for a few more minutes, catching up. As he was leaving, he turned back. By the way, I heard Patricia Henderson tried to join the HOA board in her new community in Scottsdale. How did that go? They Googled her name, found all the news coverage. She withdrew her application. He grinned. The internet is forever. I thought about that as I drove home that evening. Patricia had probably thought she was doing the right thing in her own twisted way. Maintaining standards, protecting property values, enforcing the rules. But she had forgotten the most important rule of all: use common sense. Rules are tools, not weapons. They are meant to help communities function, not to give petty tyrants power over their neighbors. My truck was parked in my driveway when I got home, right where it belonged. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on my front porch enjoying the evening. A car pulled up and Donald Pearson got out. He waved and walked over. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, want a beer?" "Thanks." He settled into the other chair on my porch. "The board wanted me to give you an update. We have finished rewriting the CC and Articus. The new vehicle policy is much more reasonable. As long as vehicles are maintained and not obviously abandoned, they are fine. That is good news. We also added a clause about emergency services. If any resident is providing emergency services, either as their profession or in response to a specific situation, the HOA cannot take any action that would interfere. It is basically the anti-Patricia rule." I laughed. "The anti-Patricia rule, I like it. You know, what happened was terrible at the time, but I think it was good for the community in the long run. We were operating on autopilot, just enforcing rules because they were written down somewhere 20 years ago. Now we are actually thinking about what makes sense. Several residents have told me it feels like a different neighborhood. All it took was almost killing some hospital patients," I said dryly. Donald winced. "Yeah, not our finest moment as an organization, but we learned from it. That has to count for something." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out. The desert night air was finally cooling down after another scorching day. "Can I ask you something?" Donald said eventually. "When Patricia refused to let you get your truck that morning, were you surprised?" I thought about it. Yes and no. I had dealt with her before, obviously. She always seemed to take things too far. But I really thought when I explained about the hospital, she would back down. I mean, we are talking about people's lives. Who would not back down from that? "Someone who cares more about being right than being good," Donald said quietly. "I have been thinking about that a lot. Patricia was not evil. She was not trying to hurt anyone. She was just so convinced that the rules mattered more than anything else that she lost sight of why we have rules in the first place. To help people live together peacefully." "Exactly. Not to control them, not to punish them, not to prove you are in charge, just to help everyone get along." He finished his beer and stood up. "Anyway, I wanted to update you in person. Thanks again for handling that whole mess with grace. You could have made it much worse for the HOA, but you did not." After he left, I sat there thinking about everything that had happened. The early morning confrontation, the desperate race to get my truck back, the news coverage, the board meeting, the lawsuit. It had been a wild ride, all because of a truck in a driveway. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. It was a screenshot of a new 5-star review for the business on Google. The review mentioned the Greenfield incident and praised us for being dependable even under difficult circumstances. Good for business. The text from Tommy Reed, followed by a thumbs-up emoji. I typed back, worth it. Followed by a thinking emoji. His response came immediately, hell yes. You are a local hero, man, milk it. I was not sure about the hero part, but things had definitely worked out. My business was thriving. The HOA had transformed from an adversarial presence to a reasonable neighbor, and Patricia Henderson was someone else's problem now. The next morning, I got up early and started my delivery route. First stop was a restaurant in Temp that needed their outdoor heater tanks refilled. As I pulled into their parking lot, the owner came out to greet me. Hey Nathan, you are that guy from the news, right? The one with the crazy HOA. I sighed internally but smiled externally. That is me. Man, that was wild. My sister lives in an HOA that tried to fine her for having the wrong color curtains. Wrong color, like anyone can even see them from outside. I had heard dozens of HOA horror stories over the past year. Everyone had one. It seemed like every homeowner association in America had at least one Patricia Henderson, someone who got drunk on the tiny amount of power they had been given and used it to make their neighbors' lives miserable. As I filled the restaurant's tanks, I thought about how lucky I had been, in a weird way. The situation could have gone much worse. If I had not gotten to Greenfield in time, if patients had actually died, I would have been devastated even though it was not my fault. The legal and moral weight of that would have been crushing, but it had worked out. I had gotten there in time. The patients were fine. Patricia had faced consequences for her actions. The HOA had reformed. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. Over the next few months, I was contacted by a local community college that wanted me to speak to their small business management class. They wanted me to talk about crisis management and dealing with unexpected obstacles. I was not much of a public speaker, but I agreed. Standing in front of 30 students, I told them the whole story. I emphasized the parts about staying calm, knowing your rights, and documenting everything. I also talked about the unexpected publicity and how to turn a negative situation into positive exposure for your business. During the question and answer session, a young woman raised her hand. Were you ever worried that fighting the HOA would backfire? Like that they would make your life even more difficult? Absolutely, I admitted. But at a certain point, you have to stand up for yourself. If I had just accepted the towing without complaint, what would Patricia have targeted next? Would she have decided my lawn was too tall, my mailbox the wrong shade? You cannot give bullies an inch, whether they are on a playground or an HOA board. Another student asked, what would you have done if the board meeting had gone the other way, if they had supported Patricia? I had actually thought about this. I would have moved, seriously. Life is too short to live somewhere you are not wanted, where you are constantly fighting over stupid rules. I am fortunate that the other board members were reasonable people who were willing to make changes. After the class, the professor thanked me and mentioned that they were developing a whole unit about HOA regulations and homeowner rights. Apparently, I was not the only person in the Phoenix area who had dealt with HOA overreach. That evening, I met Tommy for dinner at our favorite Mexican restaurant in Mesa. Over tacos and margaritas, we talked about expanding the business. The publicity had brought in enough new customers that we were considering buying a second truck and hiring another driver. You know what the funny part is, Tommy said, gesturing with a tortilla chip. Patricia Henderson probably thought she was protecting her neighborhood. Like in her mind, she was the hero keeping standards high and property values stable. She probably went home that morning feeling good about herself for standing firm. Until the news trucks showed up, I added. Right. Until reality came knocking. That is the thing about people like her. They live in this bubble where the rules are more important than people. It takes something dramatic to pop that bubble. Well, almost killing hospital patients is pretty dramatic. Truth. Tommy raised his glass. To dramatic wake-up calls and reasonable HOA boards, we clinked glasses. 2 years after the incident, Saguaro Springs had become one of the more desirable neighborhoods in Mesa. The reformed HOA, under Donald Pearson's leadership, had struck a balance between maintaining community standards and not being ridiculous about it. Property values were up, not because of strict enforcement, but because people actually wanted to live there. I still ran into former board members occasionally. They all had their own stories about Patricia Henderson and her reign of terror. One guy told me she had tried to fine him for having a crack in his driveway that was less than an inch wide. Another woman said Patricia had attempted to ban children from playing in their own front yards because it created too much noise. The more I heard, the more I realized that my situation had been the straw that broke the camel's back. The HOA community had been simmering with resentment for years, but nobody had the catalyst to do anything about it. The news coverage and the medical emergency provided that catalyst. My business continued to grow. I hired 2 more drivers and bought a 3rd truck. We became the go-to propane supplier for medical facilities throughout the Phoenix metro area, partly because of our reputation for reliability during the Greenfield incident. I also started volunteering with a local organization that helped homeowners understand their rights regarding HOAs. I would review CC and Articus, attend meetings with people who were being harassed, and generally provide support. It was amazing how many people felt powerless against their HOA, like they had signed away all their rights when they bought their home. You did not sign away your humanity, I would tell them. You did not sign away your common sense. HOAs have authority, but it is not unlimited. They still have to follow the law. One of my favorite success stories was helping a veteran who was being fined for parking his work van in his driveway. The van was for his plumbing business, and the HOA said it violated their commercial vehicle restriction. Sound familiar? I helped him research the CC and Articus, document everything, and prepare a presentation for his HOA board meeting. Unlike my situation, his board was reasonable from the start. They listened, agreed that the restriction was being applied inconsistently, and amended the rules. No towing, no drama, just reasonable adults having a reasonable conversation. That is how it is supposed to work, I told him afterward. Your HOA board members are your neighbors, not your overlords. If they forget that, remind them. I thought about Patricia Henderson occasionally, wondered if she ever reflected on what happened. Did she understand how close she had come to causing a real tragedy? Did she feel any remorse, or did she still think she had been in the right? I got my answer 3 years after the incident. I was at a home and garden expo in Phoenix, manning a booth for my propane business when I saw her. She was older, looked tired, walking alone through the convention center. Our eyes met for a moment and I saw her recognize me. She walked over, which surprised me. I expected her to avoid me. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology, a real one, not the forced apologies from lawyers." I did not know what to say, so I just waited. "I have done a lot of thinking over the past few years," she continued. "What I did was wrong, I was wrong. I got so caught up in being right about the rules that I stopped seeing you as a person. I stopped thinking about consequences beyond enforcing regulations. I am sorry." She looked like she meant it. The anger and smugness were gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine regret. "When I think about what could have happened at that hospital," she said, her voice breaking slightly, When I think that people could have died because I was being petty about a truck in a driveway, it makes me sick. I have apologized to the hospital. I have apologized to the HOA. But I never apologized to you directly. So I am sorry, Nathan, for all of it. I took a breath. I appreciate you saying that, really. It could not have been easy to come over here. It was not, but it was necessary. She paused. For what it is worth, I am not on any HOA boards anymore. I do not think I should be in that position. I do not trust my own judgment about these things. We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about going to therapy, about working to understand why she had been so controlling and petty. She was volunteering now at a homeless shelter, working with people who had real problems, not worrying about whether someone's mailbox was the approved shade of beige. I needed perspective, she said. I needed to understand what actually matters. After she left, I felt oddly peaceful. Closure, I guess. Patricia Henderson had been the villain in my story, the antagonist who had made my life difficult. But she was also just a person, someone who had made mistakes and was trying to do better. That is the thing about these stories. We want clear villains and heroes, but life is more complicated. Patricia had done something terrible, but she was not a terrible person. She had been small-minded and petty, but she was capable of growth and change. I shared the interaction with Donald Pearson later that week. He was not surprised. I saw her at a restaurant last month, he said. She seems different, humbler. Maybe the whole thing was a wake-up call for her too. Maybe that is the real happy ending, I said. Not just that the HOA got better, but that Patricia did too. That is a very generous way to look at it. Well, I am in a generous mood. Business is good, the neighborhood is peaceful, and I can park my truck wherever I want. We both laughed. Looking back now, 5 years after the incident, the whole thing seems almost surreal. It is hard to believe that a dispute about a truck in a driveway spiraled into news coverage, lawsuits, and a complete reformation of an HOA board. But that is exactly what happened. My business is now one of the largest independent propane suppliers in the Phoenix metro area. I have 12 employees, 8 trucks, and contracts with dozens of medical facilities, restaurants, and residential communities. The incident with Patricia Henderson is part of the company lore now, the story we tell new employees about why we take emergency calls so seriously. Tommy eventually became a full partner in the business. We have opened a second location in Tucson and are looking at expanding to Flagstaff. The kid who was just my dispatcher 5 years ago is now helping run a multi-million-dollar operation. I still live in Saguaro Springs. Why would I leave? The HOA is great now, the neighbors are friendly, and I have a 3-car garage where I can park anything I want. Donald Pearson stepped down as HOA president last year, but the culture he helped create continues. The board is made up of reasonable people who understand that their job is to help the community, not control it. I got married 2 years ago to a woman named Melissa Evans who I met at that home and garden expo, coincidentally. She is a landscape architect and has her own stories about difficult HOAs. We bought a bigger house, still in Saguaro Springs, and we are expecting our first child in a few months. Life is good, really good, but I never forget how close it came to being a tragedy. If Greenfield Medical Center had lost power to their life support systems, if patients had died, everything would be different. There would have been criminal investigations, massive lawsuits, probably criminal charges against Patricia. My business would have survived, but the weight of knowing that people had died while I was stuck at an impound lot would have been crushing. We got lucky. The timeline worked out. I got my truck back fast enough, got to the hospital in time, and everyone was fine. But it was close. Too close. That is why I am so passionate now about HOA reform. These organizations have enormous power over people's lives, but very little oversight. They need to be held accountable when they abuse that power. They need to understand that rules serve people, not the other way around. I have been contacted by state legislators about potential HOA reform legislation. I have testified at hearings, shared my story with lawmakers, and advocated for stronger protections for homeowners. It is slow work, bureaucratic and frustrating, but important. Because somewhere in Arizona right now, there is probably another Patricia Henderson harassing another homeowner over something trivial. There is probably another person being fined for having the wrong shade of paint, or the wrong kind of mailbox, or parking their work vehicle in their own driveway. And maybe, if we can get better laws on the books, that person will have more protection. They will not have to go through what I went through. They will not have to fight a battle just to live peacefully in their own home. That is the real ending to this story. Not just my personal happy ending, but the ongoing work to make sure HOAs function the way they are supposed to. To make sure that community standards do not become community tyranny. To make sure that the Patricia Hendersons of the world are stopped before they can cause real harm. My truck is parked in my driveway right now, the same one that started this whole mess. It has been repainted since then, gotten some new equipment, but it is the same vehicle. Every time I look at it, I remember that morning 5 years ago when I stood there helplessly watching it get towed away. I remember the anger, the frustration, the desperate race to get it back. I remember the relief when I made it to Greenfield in time. I remember the news coverage, the board meeting, Patricia's smug face turning to shock as she was voted out. But mostly, I remember the lesson. Stand up for yourself. Know your rights. Document everything. And never, ever let someone else's petty need for control put lives at risk. That is the story of how my HOA towed my propane delivery truck, then begged me to return when the hospital called. It is a story about overreach and accountability, about petty tyranny and community reform, about crisis and resolution. And it is a story that, I hope, helps someone else who is dealing with their own Patricia Henderson. You are not powerless. You do not have to accept unreasonable treatment. You can fight back and you can win. Just make sure you document everything.